Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Neutron Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 19 of The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron / the final episode of season 1. Sorry, wrong era. And how this episode begins is with Jimmy and Co. doing a practical joke on Cindy and Libby. What they do is that they mix together some banana smoothies or banana strawberry, I have no idea. Point is, they make smoothies and they offer them to the two girls as a show of goodwill, so to speak. And while the girls are suspicious of the free gift because, well, the last time they were offered something free from Jimmy, it was a mutant hamster, well, it's free smoothies. What are you gonna do? So they accept the smoothies, and at first everything seems fine, but that's when the practical joke comes in as Jimmy and his friends try to get Cindy and Libby to laugh, and when they finally do, when Jimmy accidentally slips on a banana peel, Cindy and Libby laugh so hard that their smoothies actually come out their nose. And while that in and of itself is humorous for young boys, the real crux of the prank is for Jimmy to test a new one of his inventions. So, if you remember earlier in the season, Jimmy had created a time remote that, when activated, could fast forward anything that it was pointed at. Well, apparently Jimmy has made a new device called a quantum replay device, and what it does is that it not only can allow someone to be fast forwarded, but also rewound. And so Jimmy pulls out this new remote, points it at Cindy and Libby, and basically rewinds them, laughing so hard that the smoothie came out their nose, only now it goes back in. And it's gross, and I don't like it. But yeah, Cindy and Libby think it's disgusting, but Jimmy and his friends basically start abusing the hell out of this as they begin using it to cause Cindy and Libby to keep spouting more of the smoothie out of their nose and then suck it back up. And yeah, they're obviously getting upset, and apparently it's giving them brain freeze. That's just mean. However, Hugh ends up walking by and sees his son playing with this new device, and, well, he gets curious about it and actually thinks it's fun too. And so he starts using it, and as Cindy and Libby basically beg Hugh to stop it, he does relent, and Jimmy, to try and ease the tension, so to speak, sets the remote back 5 minutes so that it'll send Cindy and Libby back into Cindy's house. As such, Hugh thinks that this invention of Jimmy's is just a wonder, and he wants to try it out, thinking it'll sweep the nation. And so he thinks that he's gotten it figured out, and so he takes the remote and thinks that if he puts in 200, then it can be used to rewind something back 2 minutes. Unfortunately, though, when he points it at Jimmy and his friends, well, it turns out he misunderstood how to use the remote, because when he points it at Jimmy and Co., they're not rewound by 2 minutes, they just fucking vanish. Although Hugh doesn't see it because the flash is so great that it actually causes spots in his eyes, and by the time he clears, he just thinks that Jimmy and his friends went back to Jimmy's lab. And so, he's left alone with the remote, while Goddard just kind of stands by and begins bemoaning the fact that his master has vanished, which, you know what, good dog. Good dog. But where the heck did Jimmy and his friends go? Well, it turns out that when Hugh messed with the device, he didn't rewind them back 2 minutes, he rewound them back 200 million years. That's a bit of a design flaw. And as such, Jimmy and his friends are now stuck in the Cretaceous period, and they have absolutely no way of getting home. It's very primitive. They're in the middle of a hot, humid jungle. And there are dinosaurs here that want them dead, as once they arrive, they are attacked by a T-Rex, and the only reason they get out of it is by a Flintstones logic, as they run into a tree, and when the T-Rex chases them, they end up running up the tree, and it bangs its head into the tree, and they just slide off of its tail before they end up making a run for it. So, yeah, they're kind of screwed. Not helped by the fact that Sheet ends up getting grabbed by a pterodactyl, which brings him back to its nest, presumably to feed him to its young. As such, Jimmy realized that the only way they can get out of this is, one, they need food and shelter, and two, he's got to use whatever crude materials he has in this era to make a crude version of his quantum replay device. And if he can do that, he can set it to fast forward and get him and his friends back home, or at the very least, he can rewind the point for Sheen so that he got brought back to a point where before he was abducted. And thankfully help does arrive as the trio, before Sheen got captured, actually do end up running into a mammal here. This adorable little kangaroo-like creature whose name I do not remember, but they end up giving it the name of Lebby for short. And it takes to Carl. In fact, he's the one that comes up with the nickname. And with Lebby's help, they are able to find the materials they need to get for Jimmy to create his new quantum replay device. But while he's able to build a new one out of literal mud and berries, I am not even joking, he needs 4 quarts of diamond in order to fully complete the circuit and power it. And thankfully, Levy is able to bring Jimmy and Carl to a giant storehouse of diamond. Unfortunately, it's too fucking big and it's harder than stone, so Jimmy can't exactly cut a small piece off in order to get it in. And while Carl's solution of banging with a coconut is his go-to, that's not going to help in the long run. Thankfully, though, that's when the T-Rex arrives, and while Jimmy, Carl, and Levy do end up running away from it, help arrives in the form of Sheen, who it turns out was not actually eaten by the pterodactyl, but was rather adopted by it, as the pterodactyl's babies end up taking to Sheen and treating him like a sibling, and when the mother comes back to the nest to teach its kids how to fly, well, apparently Sheen's new siblings end up helping him fly as they carry him around and respond to his commands. So you know what? Sheen commands dinosaurs. I can buy that. That's kind of awesome, and I dig it. But yeah, while the intervention of the pterodactyls does help Jimmy and Carl enough, unfortunately, it's 2 baby pterodactyls against the T-Rex, and the T-Rex is going to win this one. And eventually, and unfortunately, by when everything is said and done, the pterodactyls have to kind of get a far enough distance, which leaves Carl, Sheen, and Levy to be eaten by the T-Rex. Thankfully, though, one brain blast later, Jimmy does think he knows a way to both take care of the T-Rex and get the diamond, because you see, a T-Rex's skull is stronger than steel, and so if he can trick the T-Rex into headbutting the diamonds, well, that'll be enough to shatter the diamonds, and Jimmy can use that as the final relay for his quantum replay device. And thankfully, he is able to get the T-Rex's attention by throwing a coconut at it, and basically aggravating it so much that it ends up charging at him, and well, he dives out of the way just as it hits the diamonds, and well, bada bing, bada boom, they all break apart, and Jimmy is able to get a piece in order for his quantum replay device. And after it finishes charging, well, Jimmy ends up using it on a nearby volcano and fast forwards it to a point in its history, to a point in its future where it will erupt so that it can ultimately shake off the T-Rex, which it does. But you know, active volcano now. That's bad. Don't want that. Kind of overkill if you ask me. But ultimately, before the lava can get to Jimmy and his friends, Jimmy uses the crude device to send himself, Carl, Sheen, and oddly enough, Levy, back into the future. And so they arrive back in front of Jimmy's house. It seems like not a lot of time has passed. Goddard is there to greet Jimmy, and he's happy to see his master. And Levy's there because Carl has an endless array of pets for some reason. Seriously, he had a gerbil in one episode. Oh, no, he had a hamster in one episode. And in a future episode, we're going to see that he has a fish. And I think he has other animals after that. So I don't know. Although considering how this episode ends, I don't think Levy will count. But we'll get to that when we get to that. As such, Jimmy is at least happy because, well, if you're aware of the short story A Sound of Thunder, you're also aware that even the most minor changes in the past can have dire implications much later on in the future. And Jimmy and his friends did a lot of meddling back in the past. But it does at least look like that things are relatively fine, that their alterations seem to have not affected the timeline. Until they go into Jimmy's house and find Hugh locked up in a cage by Judy. And as such, Jimmy at first thinks that in this new future, men are being subjugated by warrior women, which causes Carl and Sheen to run out and basically fall at the feet of Cindy and Libby, begging for mercy. But Judy confirms that no, the reason Hugh's in the cage is because, well, after Jimmy and his friends vanished, Hugh spent the entire episode just playing with Jimmy's time device. In fact, we had little cutaways throughout the episode as we saw Hugh continuously use it to just do whatever the hell he wanted. He first found Judy in the kitchen because she had dropped a bunch of berries or cherries or whatever that she was going to use in a pie, and while Hugh used the rewind device to rewind Judy to a point where she wouldn't drop them, when Judy saw he had this device, she basically told him, "Don't abuse that. I don't think it's a good idea for you to be meddling with the affairs of time and space," which resulted in Hugh rewinding her out of the kitchen and then proceeding to do just that as he went to Sam's candy bar and began eating and uneating ice cream over and over and over to the point where it was fucking disgusting and Sam had to ask him to leave. He began using the device to go parachuting out of a plane by just jumping out of the plane without a fucking parachute, and then just before he goes splat on the ground, rewinding himself that he ends up right back on the plane. And there's also a bunch of stuff that we don't end up seeing, apparently, and I'm kind of glad we didn't see this, he used the device to have a woman experience the miracle of childbirth over and over and over. That's evil, man. That is evil. Okay, look, I'm not a woman. I cannot bear children. But based on what I've seen in my when I was in middle school health classes, and based on how much a woman fucking screams when they're pushing that baby out, I don't think it's a fun process. So yeah, he deserves to be in that fucking cage. So yeah, Judy basically has him apologize, and to pour salt on the wound, she used the quantum replay device to rewind it over so that he can say it over and over. But eventually, Judy has her fun and gives the replay device to Jimmy, or more specifically, Lebby. And then Lebby points it at the fourth wall, hits the rewind, and the episode ends exactly where it began, with Jimmy and his friends getting ready to make the smoothies, with Jimmy ending everything by saying, "Wow, deja vu." So, yeah, that was Sorry Wrong Era. Honestly, as the final episode in Season 1, there's not really a lot to go on for this one. This is part of the reason why I think The Eggpire Strikes Back was meant to be the original Season 1 finale, because that one felt like at least a better payoff to what we had seen so far in Season 1. As that special was longer, had a lot more things that tied into it, actually did reference events from the season up to that point. And likewise, it was a follow-up to the events of the movie that started the Jimmy Neutron franchise. Well, the Jimmy Neutron movie. And so yeah, well, I don't personally have a very strong positive opinion when it comes to The Eggpire Strikes Back. I do believe that it at least had the scope and length for an episode that would have been a proper season finale. Sorry Wrong Era is just another Jimmy Neutron adventure, and it's not a bad one per se. It's just that when you want to end your season out on, it's just that it doesn't feel like an episode that you'd want to end your season out on, is what I'm saying. With that said, it's not, like I said, not a bad episode in and of itself. It's just silly, goofy, fun. And that's kind of what I come to expect from the Jimmy Neutron franchise. And I'm not saying that as a detriment to the franchise, far from it. In fact, if I can give one compliment to the Jimmy Neutron franchise, is that it reminds me a bit of classic Ben 10. It's a show that is silly, dumb, but is fully aware of that and just kind of embraces it. This is a show that knows what its premise is, knows what its audience wants, and just goes nuts with it, has fun with it, just pushes it to the extreme and just uses it to create very silly, very fun scenarios that'll entertain children, and I think for the most part it does those things creatively. Sometimes it'll throw logic to the wind for in order for things to work, but the adventures that we always see are just are always silly, creative, and things that kids would kind of think about when they think about a typical boy genius. And I think Sorry Wrong Era is kind of like that, because it's at its core just a basic time travel story. That's not bad in and of itself. Admittedly, for me, time travel stories are kind of a hit and miss kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, time travel in and of itself, I think, can be a fun concept, because it allows for unlimited storytelling potential. It's one of the reasons I love Doctor Who, but it does depend a bit on the destination and what our main characters will face when they arrive at said destination. And I'm going to be honest here, sometimes the past bores me. And this is coming from someone who enjoyed The Land Before Time when he was a kid. Dinosaurs don't do it for me as much as they do for other people. And I know that's probably sacrilegious for someone that's watching this, but yeah, dinosaurs, while they do have the capacity to be cool, unfortunately are not really things that I invest too much in, especially considering that at their core, they're just feral wild animals. And sometimes when you do go back in time to that era, it means having to go back to to being primitive and going survivalist. And I'll be honest, I'm not that big a fan of survivalist stories. I am a guy that loves this technology. I love the sci-fi stuff. And while you can have that kind of thing, while you can still kind of have that thing with time travel involving dinosaurs and what have you, the environment itself is just not something that grabs me, and sadly this episode doesn't really do that much different from it. Mind you, it does do something a little bit, it does still try and be creative and fun with it, like with Jimmy and his friends meeting Lebby and having it kind of befriend the group, or likewise having Sheen befriend a gaggle of fucking pterodactyls, which is something that I think only Sheen could do, but likewise, it's not even that that still doesn't really do enough for me to really make me invested fully in the story. When I was halfway through watching this episode, I just thought I could easily summarize what was going on in maybe like a couple sentences, but No, I still got, but no, it did require a little bit more thought because more things did happen. And again, that's not a bad thing in and of itself. It just means that it just means it has a little more substance. It's just that that substance wasn't enough to fully grab me. But that does not mean that what the episode did with all that is a bad thing. Far from it. Like I said, it is still an enjoyable episode. It is kind of fun seeing the kids in this era. It is fun seeing the antics they get into. And yes, well, I could easily call into question how Jimmy was able to make a fucking time remote out of literal mud and berries. I'm gonna let it slide because I can buy that Jimmy could make bullshit like that and pull it out of his ass. So I can buy that. So I do find that to be enjoyable, and I do find the creative use of Jimmy going up against Jimmy out using a T-Rex to get the final component to be genuinely fun. But I think the thing that I most remember this episode for, and that I always thought back to whenever I thought about this episode, is the B plot with Hugh, because oh my god, it is just kind of funny. Look, Hugh as a character is always a fun time because of how much of a goofball he is. But I kind of like the idea of an episode where Hugh discovers whatever Jimmy's latest invention is, and then begins taking advantage of it. I mean, and here's the thing, like, that's one of the things that I think is right for storytelling potential. While Jimmy's parents are aware of what their son gets up to, they typically have a hands-off approach to it unless things get very serious, at which point they will intervene and give their son the chewing out that he rightfully deserves. But there are not as many episodes that have Hugh or Judy utilize what Jimmy has invented for their own benefit. And so having an episode where Hugh ends up taking a time travel device that Jimmy created and then just deciding, you know what, I'm gonna play with this, is just kind of fun. And I like that even Judy sees what Hugh is doing with his device and thinks, oh, this is bad idea written all over it. And the only reason that Judy is not able to stop him is because he rewinds her chastising the point before she entered the kitchen. Although considering that how other people reacted when they were out at the time travel field, she'd still remember chewing him out. She just wouldn't be in the kitchen anymore, so I don't know. But it's still kind of fun to see. But regardless, seeing Hugh just take advantage of this and everyone getting disgusted with him because he's basically using this time travel device to uneat shit and then basically ruining their days, I kind of just find that hilarious. I just love that. And I love that he gets everyone gets so mad at him, he's brought home in an angry mob. And when he's brought back home by the angry mob, he tells Judy, hey, remember when I said I wouldn't be brought home by an angry mob anymore? Which implies this has happened before, and I want to know what happened that last time, okay? So at the very least, that subplot is fun, and the payoff is great. I loved seeing Jimmy react with absolute horror when he arrived back in the present with his friends and saw Hugh locked in the cage, and Judy basically just told Jimmy, no, that's not what happened. Your father fucked around with your device, so he's staying in that cage for a while. I don't know. It's just like, I kind of love that. I kind of, like, maybe it's going too far, but counter-argument, this guy was fucking with time travel and disgusting everyone, including a woman who gave birth several times, so I'm sorry. That one's a big if. That's a big what the fuck moment. I think he deserves to be in that cage for that. But that subplot I found to be the more memorable of the two plots. But again, that doesn't mean the main plot is bad. It just didn't grab my attention as much as anyone else. I just found the environment and area to be it's kind of bland for my taste. Doesn't mean it wouldn't do it for someone else, just it's not for me. But even with that in mind, the episode itself is still enjoyable, fine, just a silly fun time. There's nothing egregiously wrong with it. It's just a bit of fun and silliness. Still got some good humor, a creative use for the new device. The new device, even if it is just basically an old device with a new skin with a new coat of paint on it. Overall, it's just an enjoyable fun time. Maybe not the best episode to end the season on, but still worth your time if you're interested. So, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. It's just a fun time overall, so. Yeah, kind of ending season 1 on a whisper, not a bang. But, well, before we get into season 2, there is one more thing we need to look at. And if you remember my prologue, you know what's coming next. But in case you don't, I hope you tune in next week as we look at the first of 3 crossover specials that the Jimmy Neutron franchise has taken part in with the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour.